Hey guys, yeah, so this lesson is going to be kind of odd just because I'm sick, obviously. So I'm going to actually use this lesson to just kind of consolidate everything so that both groups are at the same spot. So I'm going to start where the other group left off, my evening group, because they're a little bit behind the guys in the daytime. This will kind of catch up both groups at the same time. So for those of you that are not in the other group, you're welcome to, skip ahead to the part that becomes relevant to you. Otherwise, I'm gonna do everything all in one go here. So really, what I'm going to try to cover and kind of get out of the way tonight is the view component part, which was the other piece that we were supposed to cover last week but didn't quite cover. The shop part of it, I was going to do a review potentially in week 6, which would have been just a nice recorded lesson and that kind of thing. But I think what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to, because you don't really need a review for the quiz. It's all multiple choice. It's open book. It's open internet. Like, I mean, it's not going to be difficult by any means. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to move the shopping cart portion of our stuff. Sorry, one second. Sorry, you might see little gaps in time here, guys, just while I cough and I shut it down. Anyways, I'm going to just move it over to next week. So we'll cover the shopping cart controllers and models and stuff like that next week. So everything we need to be able to add something to a shopping cart will be completed then. I'll also issue assignment 3 then. So assignment 3 will be due during reading week. Assignment 3 won't be very big. It will be basically you implementing that shopping cart process into your project, and then also converting your menu into a view component will basically be it. And that's it. So tonight, super light lesson, very quick, probably an hour, maybe tops. Yeah, and then if you have any questions whatsoever, obviously you can reach out on Slack. That does lead to one more thing. I've been finding that I'm having trouble keeping up on the Slack messages. It's funny, out of 8 years, this is the first year that I've ever had this issue. There's just a lot of them. Like, out of 80 students, I'm generally getting probably about 15 to 20 messages a week for support on various parts of people's projects and stuff like that. And a lot of the questions, to be honest, could be answered by just reviewing the lesson. Um, I want to give you a bit of advice when we talk about going into the industry. The last thing you want to do is turn your senior developer or your tech lead or your supervisor or whoever it is into Google, essentially, right? Don't make a person Google for you. Just you Google it, right? Or if you have the resources available for you to do the research, then you should do that. I understand how it's kind of easy to be able to reach out and ask those questions, because I do make it quite available for you. But in the same aspect, understand I'm not paid during that time to answer questions and do a ton of research. I don't get any compensation for the college of that. I just do it out of the goodness of my heart, and I don't mind helping and supporting when it makes sense. But when it's just a lot of questions that are like, come on, guys, read the error messages, look it up on Google, or do the due diligence and watch the lesson, then I ask that you guys take on that stuff yourselves if you can. Okay, just be mindful of my time, be respectful of my time is essentially what I'm asking for. Obviously, if you're stuck though, don't just hold it to your chest. Make sure you reach out, and then I should be able to help you as well. One other thing too, there is about 15 people who don't come to the class in person, but regularly need support. If you're that person, I would honestly recommend that you make an effort to come to class at least once, because it is much easier for me to work with you face to face and in person and go through your laptop quickly and resolve whatever the issue is that you're having on your laptop. I can do it usually within a few minutes, as opposed to trying to guess what you're asking me on Slack. The other thing is too is if you are reaching out via Slack and asking me a question on Slack, make sure you're giving me your GitHub link. Make sure you've pushed that code up, because your screenshots, to be quite frankly, are usually useless. Like, I can't really tell a lot by screenshots. I need to go into the code and I need to figure out what it is. And make sure you're telling me what the error message is. Just saying, this doesn't work, or I'm not seeing anything on the screen, or stuff like that. That's too vague. That doesn't tell me a lot of information. You really need to make sure you're concise about what's wrong. Provide me, the what you were doing, the steps up to the process, how I can replicate your error, those type of things. Like, that's helpful information. It makes my life a lot easier. It makes it quicker for me to be able to resolve whatever your problem is. So those are the kind of things I'm asking for. The other thing too, and this is a general pet peeve of mine, when I help somebody, I do like a response of, yes, sir, that worked. Because otherwise I'm left there kind of going, did it work? Did it not work? I don't know if this is just a new generational thing. I'm not sure, but there's no follow-up. So I have no idea if I corrected your problem or not. Not all of you do this, just a handful of you. But please make sure you let me know that it worked and that your issue is resolved. Otherwise, you're just leaving me guessing, right? Anyways, that's all I'm asking for. End of the speech. Let's move on into tonight's lesson. Okay, so let's get into this lesson. So like I said, I'm opening up my night group, so the 6 o'clock group, but we're going to start off where we left off with your lesson, which is actually, I don't remember where we left off. You guys are a chatty bunch. Trying to remember where we left off. We created our... Oh, right. We didn't actually finish off the partial. That was the issue. We don't actually have... Or did we finish the view partial? Oh, we have it. Or we have validation scripts partial? What the heck is that? Okay, so here it is. We have the table partial. So we must have done it. Okay, you know what? The best thing to do when you're not sure where you are is just do like a .NET run or whatever it is, or hit Control F5. Something interesting I found though, when you do .NET run and you boot up the application, oh god, I'm going to need to copy it. I'm going to apologize in advance if I don't get to the mute button in time. All right, so interesting thing, if you do .NET Run and you're trying to find out the address, there's a couple of different places you can look. You can look under Properties in the launch settings, but it also shows up right here. It tells you now listing on this address. And if you hold down your Control key and click it, it'll open in your browser. See? Open. All right, so if I'm correct, I need to create a department. I have a department already. Go to products. I don't have a product. So let me create a product. Great. All right, there's my product. So now if I go to departments and details, right, this is the part we didn't have left. And I think this is being served right now from our partial. I want to believe that that's coming from the partial. Let me go check. So I'm going to go to my products and my index file here, and yet we did do the partial. Okay, so that's where we ended up last week. We were at that point where we had the partial inside that view. So just to recap, and I'm sure both groups would appreciate this, just to recap, the way we did that was we created our partial underneath our shared directory, and we created a new file called products table partial. That's our partial. Inside there is basically the exact same content that was in the products details view. We just copied it and pasted it here. The only changes that we made, I believe, was we added this line at the top, which would allow us to be able to feed it a product. That's what this means. Sorry, feed it products. IEnumerable means like a list of products. So this allows us to feed it a list of products, and then we can loop over that list of products and output them inside our table here. So we have this. That's great, but now if you want to actually utilize this in a different view, you need to load it as a partial. So if I go to the index page in our products, we have this line here that allows us to do that. This portion here is a link to that partial. It's a reference to where the partial lives, right? Then this part here is us passing data to the partial. So we're literally passing our model to the partial itself. And then that's what's going to feed the partial. So now I want to do the same thing in the departments. When you go to the department and you go to details of apartment here, I want to list all the products underneath that department. And there's a couple of things that we have to do to make that happen. So one of the things we do is we need to copy this because we're going to absolutely need this part. Then we need to go to the details under the department here, and we'll put it just above the edit part here, like just below the edit part here. And we'll paste our little partial here. Now I'm going to restart my server. Jump back to my page, and I'm going to refresh. And this is likely going to break. And the reason why it's breaking is because I'm supposed to be giving that thing a list of products, and I'm not actually giving it anything. So there's a couple of things we need to do. One, model will not actually be a representation of those products. Because I'm under the departments, model is actually a department. It's not a product list. If I want it to be the product list, instead what I need to do here is I need to provide model, which stands for the department itself, dot products. And I'm getting this field here, the dot products field, from my models department. It's this part right here, the iCollection part. Now the problem is when I go to load this is still going to fail, and that's because this is allowed to be null. So when I hit Control-C, .NET Run, because that is allowed to be null, this is still going to error out, as you can see. And the only way to fix that is by presetting those products. And I can do that in the department thing here. There's a couple of things that we just need to add. Well, it's not a couple of things, it's just really one thing we need to add. Sorry, two things, actually. We need to remove this question mark, making it no longer optional. So this is no longer an optional property. Now it is required. However, we're going to preset it with a default value if for any reason it is empty. So we're going to say new list product, like so. And now this has an empty list of products associated with it automatically. So that's the first thing we need to do. I'm going to hit Control-C, and I do believe this will satisfy the issue. However, it won't populate the table with anything. The table will wind up empty at the end of the day. So if I hit Control-R, this should now, yep, see, it's all perfectly fine. But we know we have a product, but we don't see it here. And the reason we don't see the product there is because we are literally just pre-filling this with an empty list of products. Sorry. So now I need to go to the controller, and I need to basically say, when you grab a department, pre-fill the products with the products that are associated with that department. So the way we're going to do that is we come here to our departments controller. We're going to scroll down to where it says index here, or sorry, to details here. And we're going to come down to where we actually pull the records from the database. This line right here is doing that magic for us. This await, we'll talk about async and await in another day, but right now just understand that you need this await. If this thing is async, then you need this await. But really what we care about is this underscore context. That's our connection to our database. It's what facilitates communicating with the MySQL database and grabbing the data that we want to grab. However, it returns back our ORM, and our ORM, which is Entity Framework, allows us to be able to interact with the database in an object relational way, meaning we can use properties in order to access fundamental parts of our application. So for example, departments is an actual property representing the entire table of departments in our database. If I wanted to write to that, all I have to do is access the departments object, and it comes with a whole list of things that I can now use to communicate with the data. All right, let's try this now. I've got water in me, I've got a holes in me. Let's see if I can get more than a sentence out before I start coughing. All right. So we have the departments table. This line here is a method that's available on the departments object. And this line allows us to be able to, basically all it's doing is this creates a select statement. That's really all it's doing. It's just creating a select statement. And this part here is our where clause. So it basically says select the department, right? So select from department, select asterisk actually, because it'll return back all the columns. Select star from departments where the ID is equal to the past ID. So the ID that we're actually passing into this method here. We're going to add on to this because just like you would if you were to write this in SQL, if you want to add the products for that department, you have to do a join. So in MySQL, we would have a join statement in here that reaches out and grabs any product that has a department ID that's equal to this ID, right? Well, we get to do it in a little bit of an easier way. We just say .include, and then this takes something called a lambda. A lambda is a function. It's an anonymous function, meaning it's a function without a name, right? But the argument it's expecting is a whole function. And it looks like this. It's the same syntax that you see here. This is the parameter for that function. This is the fat arrow that indicates the parameter is being passed into the function. And then this is the logic. This whole body right here is the logic for that function. So all we need to do here is say department. So we use that as the parameter name. It doesn't really matter what the parameter name is as long as you reference it the same way. When .include gets called, somewhere in the body of .include, it will actually fire off this function call for us, and it will fill this parameter with an argument, and then we can access it in here. So it doesn't really matter what it's called, but I call it department just because that makes sense. All I'm going to say is department dot products, like so. And what this is going to do is when this executes, it's going to create a join statement, and it's going to grab all the products that relate to that department and pull them back for me. Now, they're not going to be sorted or anything, and that's fine. They're going to be kind of chaotic, but we can accept this the way it is. So I'm just going to move back to opening up my thing here. And I'm going to call .NET run. And literally this one line is going to feed that table that I was looking at before. I go back to the table. And now I can see the ASDF line that's in here. So the good benefits of partials is that they provide the data, they provide a way to basically create dry, which stands for don't repeat yourself, create dry views, right? So instead of writing the same view logic over and over again, you now have this kind of like containerized version of that view. So partials are very, very beneficial. And there's like places that I can see inside our code where partials would definitely help us out even more. Like, for example, if you go to like views and create, this form here is basically duplicated multiple times, right? It's here in the create, and then the exact same form is sitting here in the edit. And it's redundant, right? You have basically the form in two places. It would be nice if you could instead just call form action and have this part here just basically be dropped in as a partial, because it populates regardless of what comes in. In fact, I'm pretty sure the exact same form. Yeah, look, so almost line for line, the only difference is this input. That's the only difference. And what's funny is that input doesn't even need to be below this line. You could literally have that input there. And then this whole body here is the exact same as this whole body right here. So you could do that as a partial and then just load it in. And that would work just fine, right? And then just have this part here be the wrapper. And so, like, there's places to get rid of that redundancy. And you might be like, well, what does that do for me? Well, to be honest, what it does, when you have edits to your form, instead of you having to remember to edit in every place that that form exists, you're creating your edit, you only have to edit it in one spot. Make those changes in that one spot and then move on, right? Because it automatically gets adopted by every place that partial is loaded. Again, it basically takes those views and turns them almost into like a function definition that you're just able to call wherever you need to. Don't repeat yourself. And that includes for anywhere you can possibly apply that methodology. So we've got our thing in here, right? I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save it. If you guys want to do that type of stuff and move over your things to partials, I absolutely advocate for that. But we're not going to do that tonight. That's something you guys can do. I'm pretty sure that brings us up to the point of where group 2, which is the one that starts at 3 o'clock, group 2 ended. So that should be the last piece. I don't think there was anything I'm missing after that point. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. So what about... so there's view partials, which is one way to kind of like consolidate your stuff. The problem with view partials is if you need further logic in processing the data. So say, for example, I want to build out a menu. If I build out a menu, right, like we've got this menu right now. This menu you see at the top, right? And it's pretty simple. It's got like 5 things inside of it, whatever. But every time I want to add to the menu, I have to go to the views, I have to load up the shared, and I have to go to layout, and I have to add it in here. Not really a big deal, but as this grows, and I need, sorry, as this grows and I need to add more complexity like authentication, authorization and stuff like that, and conditional transactional statements in here, this becomes more complex to build. It would be easier if I could abstract it, have a place where I could modify those entries, and then just have it consume it from there. And the problem is with a view partial, that doesn't really work. I could create a view partial that does some of that logic and then give it the data, but the data part is the part that's off. Because it's not a resource, right? It's not a resource that exists in our system. It's not something in our database. It doesn't make sense for me to pass model data to it. Instead, what makes a lot of sense for this particular thing is to do what's called a view component. A view component is like a tiny model view controller app all in itself. It has the view component part, which is like a controller. It has a model, which provides it data. And then it has a view, which is just a small, it's basically like a view partial. It's almost identical to a view partial. The difference is everything that view component requires is contained within the view component. So it's logic, it's business logic, it's data, and it's presentation. All 3 pieces all in one little tiny MVC app, basically. So creating a view component is not difficult, but we do require some setup. We need to add a folder, a few folders actually, that we didn't have before. The first folder we're going to create, and this is at the root level with everything else, we're just going to create a view folder here called components, like so. And then inside our views folder, inside our shared, we're going to create another new folder in here, also called components. So for any view component that we're going to create, the minimum thing we're going to have is a new component and a new view component piece. We'll always have those two pieces. So these folders will always stay this way. Inside these components, though, this is where things are going to get a little bit different. So I want to create a navigation menu component. I'm going to take this whole nav and put it into my component. So I'm going to require a few different pieces here. One piece I need is a folder in this components folder called view components. Sorry, this is also a staple that you need. But in there, I'm going to create a new file, and this is unique to the component you're creating. So navigation menu view component.cs. The naming is not optional. How you name this is required. It has to follow this same convention. The first part is the name of the component, so navigation menu. And the last part is the type of component it is. This is a view component. Under components, we create a folder with the same name as our view component. So navigation menu, but you don't add the view component part of it. And then for the view itself, we're going to create a new file in here, and it's going to begin, or sorry, it's just going to be called default.cshtml. And all of our view logic is going to go inside here. We have one more piece, and this isn't required, it's optional, but it is common to use with view component. This is the model, and the model is what's going to help us provide data. I am so sorry, guys. It's just, these coughing spells are bad, and oh, Jesus. Yeah. That last one lasted a really long time. Okay, I'm gonna, I wonder if I should, or if we should just call it at this. Okay, let's get our navigation over to the view component. That's the first part. I just want to write the view component so we at least have the view component in place. We'll try to make this quick. So the way we set up a view component is we're going to need a few libraries. Oh, I'm in the wrong thing. I was trying to figure out why I wasn't showing the right thing. We need to be in the navigation view component here. Oh, right. I was making a model. I'm so sorry. We need the model. So the model is just a representation of the data that we're going to want to send to our view component. And the data, we're going to create a new model here. We're going to call it menu item.cs. The data is going to be what a menu item would look like. So we're going to put it under the namespace of world dominion dot models. And we have been doing this with the open braces and then putting everything in the open braces. Oh, I think I'm actually going to just continue doing that. We'll just continue doing it that way. You don't actually have to. You can define it at the top, almost like a decorator, and then write it underneath, but we'll do it this way. Instead of using a class, we're just going to use a struct, which will represent our menu item. And we'll just write out our different properties for it. So we're going to want to know what controller they're using. We'll want to know what action they want to fire. We'll need a label for it, obviously. And then we'll stop there. We have other additions that we're going to add in the future. But for right now, we'll just keep it nice and simple. All right. So now that I've got my model, I'm ready to set up my navigation view component. So for this, I am going to need, I'm doing this underneath this section here. I'm going to need some libraries. So I'm going to need the Microsoft.ASP.NETCore.MVC library, because that's where the view component library comes from. And then I'm going to need the World Dominion .models so that I can access my menu model. I'm going to dump this under a namespace of World Dominion .components .view components. That will namespace it so that we know that all of our view components are under here. So if we were to bring in a library of other view components, there'd be no cross-contamination with that library. I'm going to create a public class, and it's going to be the name that we gave the file. Don't write an S here accidentally, and it's going to inherit from a view component. Then we're going to write this method, and this method's important. The data type is called iView component result, but the name is not flexible. It needs to be called invoke. And the reason is that when we actually go to utilize it, it has to have that. It's going to actually call that for us. And right now it's mad at us because it wants to return something. And what's interesting, what it wants to return is a view, just like our controllers do. Same kind of idea. This is the same as like working with an iAction result. So we need to get some data in here. So we're going to create a var menu items equals new list. And the data type for our list is going to be a menu item. And we're going to pre-populate this. So we're going to create some menu items here. So we're going to do a new menu item. And it's going to have a controller defined. So we'll do the home one. Comma action defined, and we'll do index for that one. And then we'll do the label, and the label will be home. So that's our home link. Now we're also going to need departments in here, right? So departments controller is departments. And we're going to list this in the order of our things, right? In the order we want them displayed. And then products. Also index with products. And then this one can be about or contact or whatever it is that you have, right? So we're going to do home. And I think we do have an about. I can't remember, but I'll just call this privacy for now. We'll just have the 4 links because I don't think I have about on with both classes right now. So there we go. Now these are not currently being passed anywhere. We need to actually take our menu items and pass them as an argument in our view. And we would do the same, and that actually pre-fills that model that you guys have been seeing around in the views. That winds up pre-filling that variable called model. So we have our model, we have our view component. Now we just need the view itself. And I mean, it makes sense to start out with the actual view from the layout. So we're just going to go to the layout here. And here's the whole nav section. I'm just going to collapse it. And I'm going to grab this whole nav section, and I'm going to press Control X to cut it. I'm going to go to the default page, and I'm going to paste it in place. Then I'm going to right-click and hit Format so it formats it properly. Then at the top of the page, I'm going to add a declaration, @model list menu item. And that will go at the top of the page. Now that I have that in place, I'm going to go ahead and start adding in the pieces that I want inside. So I've got my button. All of this is fine and can stay the way it is. But the piece that I'm going to need is right here where all these LIs are. All these LIs I want to generate and put there. So I'm going to get rid of all but one. Next, I'm going to wrap this in a for each loop. And I'm going to add these curly braces here. And then I'm just going to move this up a row and tab it in. And then I'll add my conditional statement here so that we can see this part. All right, so I've got this in here. I just need to write the conditional statement in here, which will be var menu item in model. And model comes from that like global variable, but this, the data that is in this right now is coming from here. These menu items is what is actually populated inside model. And now we just have to adjust this for each loop so that we see the pieces that we want. So we have our nav item. It says a link here, right? We just have to fill in the pieces that are going to be in here instead. We can get rid of this ASP area. It's for something different. But we need to fill in our home controller. So we're going to add in the at menu item dot controller. And then in here where it says index, we're going to do at menu item dot action. And then the label will be at menu item dot label. And that generates the whole menu for us. Now, here's the thing though, we still need to put this somewhere because right now, yes, we have this wonderful view component, but we need to output the view component. And the only way to output the view component is with a statement. And partial, when we used partial, that's how we did it the last time. This is a little bit different. This looks like so. At await component dot invoke async, and then the name of our component that we want to load here. And that is it. So just to walk it through again, we have a model with the representation of the data that we want to pass to our view component. We have a view component that actually builds out that logic almost like a controller action and then sends it to the view component, whatever data it is that we want to do to the view component. The naming convention of this is not accidental, it is intentional. So navigation menu is super important, just like the name of the actual method itself is super important. Otherwise, we can't guarantee that it will load properly. So those have to be the names they are. Then we have our view under a menu called navigation menu where it will be looked for. This again is intentional. All of everything we have done is intentional and has to be named the way they're named and in the order they are in. In here we have a for each loop that will output this menu for us in each of these items. Then inside our layout file, we're invoking that particular navigation menu. Later on, we're going to build a notification system. And when we build the notification system, it's going to be a view component as well. So you'll get fully used to what view components are and when to use them. There's times that they make sense, and then there's times that they don't, where a partial is perfectly good enough. This particular scenario, when the data doesn't correlate to a resource in your database, it makes sense to use a view component. All right, let's run it. I feel another coughing spell building. It all built okay. Refresh. If everything's good, we should see a menu up here. There it is. Home, departments, products, and privacy. So say you had the brief, right? And you wanted to add brief. Now all you have to do is go to your navigation menu view controller or view component. Just duplicate one of these in. Say your controller is called home still, but your action is called brief, and your label is called brief. Boom. Control C, .NET Run. And this doesn't care if the controller action exists or anything like that, that you could build that logic in. Boom. See? Brief exists now. I mean, it's going to fail, right? But at least it exists. Everything is in place here now. See? Privacy, home. And the cool thing is it still abides by our custom routes that we created before as well. Anyways, I'm going to remove that because I don't need that inside here. There we go. And that's it. We are now caught up and ready to start implementing the shopping cart, which we will do next week. This should give you enough of a leisure bit of time to finish off that assignment 2, as well as work on other projects that you have, but also maybe study a little bit with .NET. You should try to put some more time into it so you fully understand what's going on, especially if you're struggling with it. All right, guys. Again, very sorry for the way this lesson is this week, but trust me, you don't want me coughing on you, giving you any diseases. So I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.